Welcome to Testimony Mountain. It's such a joy to have Alice back with us, and she's going to be sharing a continued part of her journey, some more of her testimony. And if you haven't listened to her previous recordings, I encourage you to go back, as well as she's been on other platforms that have been really powerful as well. And so I just want to welcome you back, Alice, and
Thank you.
release it to you
Thank
to take it
you.
away.
Thank you so much, Adina. You are so precious, and I just love your Testimony Mountain station, everything you do for everyone, and how powerful it is to give our testimony. It says in the Bible that we overcome the enemy by the word of our testimony and the blood of the Lamb. So, the word of our testimony. And I speak a lot, for those that don't know me, on mental health awareness, specifically for mental illnesses that affect many, many people throughout the world. But specifically, I have quite a few, have a little bucket list here of mental illnesses, but I have borderline personality disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, post traumatic stress disorder, anxiety disorder, and treatment resistant depression. So, those are the ones specifically that I suffer with. And the thing I want to say about that is that the journey with mental health is a very personal journey. It's not one thing works for everyone. Okay, so if this medication or whatever works for one person and you don't want to take medication or it doesn't work for you, that is a very personal thing.
Yes,
Do you know what I'm saying, Adina?
yes,
It's just, I don't think it's right for any of us to point a finger and say, well, you shouldn't be taking medication because, you do exercise or, sunlight or whatever. Yes, all those things and more. And I've been on this journey my whole entire life, actually, because
yeah.
I come from a trauma background.
Mhm.
So I was severely traumatized as a child through my family, which is a whole nother story in itself. And a lot of the symptoms that I suffer from set in before I was even 3 years old. So when you look at that and you take a whole lifetime, you can't say, well, this is going to work and this isn't. I have had many medications that haven't worked for me, and you got to know when to get off of them too.
Yeah,
Because if they're not working, what's the sense in staying on them? And,
absolutely.
I'll just do a real quick adjunct here, and prayers go out to all the people in Maine that were affected by that man that I guess he was in the military.
Mhm.
And did you hear about it?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so he was in a psychiatric ward for 2 weeks, which I'm not too keen on psychiatric wards, never been to one, and I don't wish to go to one,
Yep.
but I've heard the stories. And the thing is that they released him with all the medication that they pump you filled with
Mhm.
while you're in the psych ward. And he hauled off and shot, what was it, 18 people and injured 15? Is that shot and killed 18 and injured 15?
I believe so, yeah.
So it's things like that. This is going to sound really weird, that give mental illness a bad name.
Yeah.
Now that sounds really weird because it is mental illness that might have led him to do that.
Mhm.
But in essence, some of those medications can really mess with your mind.
Yes.
And that's why I'm saying that if I go on a medication and I feel this is really strong and I'm having side effects here and I want to make sure that I'm not going to continue this, I go off it right away.
Yeah.
So I don't know if other people don't notice that or feel that, Adina. I don't know if they figure, well, the doctor prescribed it, so I might as well stay on it, or whatever the case is. But that's very dangerous. If you feel your brain is going wonky, you have to be the one to say, this medication is not working with me.
Yeah, it is so true. And, I think for a lot of
Mhm.
us, the doctor just says, take this medication, and you don't really understand the ramifications. And I know with our son with bipolar, um, you know, we just, gave him the medication, and we did get off of it because it wasn't helping and all of that. But it was interesting because he's an adult now, and I gave him his medical records or whatever, and he was like, Mom, I can't believe these are really heavy medications and this is high dose. I can't believe, but back then we didn't have, the access to the internet in the same way that we do today, to even research all of that stuff, and so we just went
Mhm.
along with whatever the doctor said, and probably wasn't all that helpful for him at that time.
Yeah, it's really something. And you as a parent, a husband, a wife, a mother, a father, even a sibling, you want to be proactive in making sure that the medication the mentally ill person is taking is working properly for them. And a lot of times, family members will notice something's a little askew here, something's off. We want to work on this, talk to the doctor and see if he can change it up, maybe lower the dosage, sometimes even higher the dosage. It
Yeah.
really depends. And so that's what I wanted to just get out there, because there's a lot of bad talk about psychiatric medication and also psychiatric wards. And so I wanted to just get that out on the table before I started in with my testimony, if that's making any sense. So, but what I want to talk to you today about is OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. And what this is, it really starts in the brain. And as the brain is forming as an infant, there is actually some neurotransmitters that go off alignment in the brain of a person with OCD. And once you contract OCD as a psychiatric illness, you will have it for the rest of your life. God, unless God heals you. It will be that you'll have it for the rest of your life, which is a very sad, it's a very sad thing to deal with, to realize I'm going to be dealing with this. But the good news is we can pray, we can ask God to deliver us, and also we can learn how to manage our symptoms. So I'm going to talk about the different types of OCD that exist, the ones that I've dealt with, and then I'm also going to talk about how to manage it. Okay? So, the first part of OCD that usually comes, and this has to do with a great loneliness, a great feeling of abandonment. If the child has gone through something where they're traumatized because they've been neglected,
Mhm.
hoarding.
Mhm.
Hoarding comes into play.
Yeah.
And what hoarding is, and I'll just say here, it's the keeping of things with little or no use of value.
Mhm.
And the thing is, to the person that's hoarding, it's of great value to them.
Mhm.
The more things that they can keep around themselves, they feel safe and they feel secure through hoarding. They may collect things, they may collect anything under the sun. I mean, it could be little figurines, it could be um, cars, it could be anything that they collect. But a hoarder is somebody that has just gone off the deep end with their collection.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions on that, or?
No, just, in my groups and stuff, I've observed that, in trauma that tends to go to one of two sides, and it
Mhm.
can be the hoarding, and then the other side is more the perfectionism OCD, where everything absolutely has to be perfect,
Right.
otherwise they can't rest.
Hmm.
And sometimes the perfectionist looks good because it's like, oh, everything's neat and clean, and everything's
Hmm.
whatever, but it's the same form of bondage. It just
Hmm.
manifests differently.
I
So
call it the prison of OCD, the prison of
yes.
OCD. Yeah, so hoarding is definitely one. Now, my mother is a hoarder, and my brother and I grew up with this. She even in the attic, she had racks installed into the ceilings, and she had she used to go to Goodwill and Salvation Army, so she could never say, well, I'm spending too much money because I'm getting it, at Goodwill and Salvation Army.
Mhm.
But she had racks installed, and she would have clothing from one end of the house to the other end of the house on both sides. And
Wow.
then she would also hoard shoes, purses, cosmetics, everything imaginable for games and toys. Like at Christmas time, you could go shop the attic. And my brother and I used to sneak up there. And we got hit with the hairbrush if we went up there. But we used to sneak up, and she would have games galore, dolls, G.I. Joes, everything imaginable would be up in that attic. And it wasn't just that, it was every drawer and every cabinet of the house and every closet was chock filled with stuff, Adina. You couldn't open the drawer, it would explode on you. It was crazy. And the really bad thing, oh God bless her, she's 95 years old now, so God bless my mother. She has really survived through a lot. And my father was absolutely hellish to live with.
Yeah.
And so he abused her very, very badly. And that's why she ended up hoarding. But the one thing she does is she hoards food in the refrigerator.
Mm.
And one time, this is how bad it gets. And mom, if you're listening to this, I love you. And I know that we've been through this together. I cleaned out her refrigerator when I was probably in my late 20s.
Mhm.
And I took out all the rotted fruit and items and everything else. And I put it out in the garbage can. When she got home from work, she about threw a fit at me. She was so upset. And she actually went to the garbage can, got the food out, and put it back in the refrigerator.
Wow.
Okay. So hoarding, there's different levels of it. Now she's not that bad today, but still I wouldn't touch her refrigerator. I wouldn't go near it. And she's got in her garage, she has canned food, rice, everything you can imagine, shampoo, deodorant, body washes, everything. It looks like a store. It looks like an actual store in her garage. Actual store.
Well, now we know where to go if there's a shortage.
Absolutely, but that is hoarding, and there are a lot of people that do this because again they feel safe. They feel like if I run out of it or if I don't have it surrounding me. So that is really, you talk about a prison cell. It's a prison cell.
Yeah.
The next one is, you spoke about this, requiring things to be an absolute certain way. They have to be a certain way. All the furniture has to be in alignment. I remember I had a girlfriend who was like this, and she also comes from a very traumatic background. And her hairbrush had to be a certain way, and her mirror had to be a certain way, and her makeup had to be a certain way. And she would yell and scream at me, "You put my hairbrush upside down." And I'd be like, "What?" So, this is like everything has to be, if the chair is not here, it's here.
Mhm.
It has to be exactly the same. And the thing with this is that they're experiencing extreme stress when objects do not convey in the proper way for them.
Yeah.
Okay. And we have to be aware of that. That's a lot of stress for them. They really feel really uptight about it.
Mhm.
The next one is compulsive counting. Now, when it comes to one that I deal with, I will tell you is counting. And what this means is sometimes the counting can be done in patterns or follow a very strict routine where things must be counted in a certain way. And it can take up the whole day in the person's mind. And I do count all day long. And I'm so used to it that I don't even realize that I do it. And certain numbers, like if there's a lucky number or an odd number or an even number, like you have to start all over again
Mm.
and go back. So I actually, I mean, if I, I mean, I'm divulging my testimony. I have to wash my hair or wash my hands a certain amount of times. And if I mess up the sequence or I space out and I forget I'm counting, boom, I got to start right back at the beginning again.
Mhm.
And it's very stressful, very, very stressful. And so that is something that people contend with. Myself, I'm one of them. Okay. And then the next thing that is positioning of items. And this could be in a cabinet, it could be in a display where everything has to face just a certain way. All the labels have to be out front, or books have to be alphabetized so that everything is in a certain way. Spice racks are alphabetized. And if you take one out and you don't put it back in the right place, the person gets really upset. So that's another one that happens with OCD. I don't have that one, fortunately. This one I did have was frequent hand washing. Now I'm going to tell you, hand washing, hair washing, body washing. If you're a victim of sexual abuse as a young child, you feel dirty, like you just can't get that feeling off of you. It's really, really hard. So I'm going to tell you what I used to do when I was in my 20s. And you're not even going to believe this. It is absolutely insane. But I was a legal secretary back then. I started as a legal secretary right out of high school. And I worked for a law firm that was about 10 minutes away from my home. And what I would do is I couldn't have any wrinkles in my clothes. Now, I don't have this today. I have some shreds of it, but I couldn't have any wrinkles in my clothes. Everything had to be clean, immaculate, pressed out. My makeup had to be perfect. My hair had to be washed a certain amount of times. I would go home at lunchtime and I wouldn't eat lunch. I would re-shower,
Mm.
re-wash my hair, re-iron my clothes,
Ugh.
re-iron my clothes, redo my makeup, and rush back to work.
Wow.
And this was every single day of my life working. And then if we were going out afterwards to
Mhm.
like 5 o'clock happy hour or whatever, I would have to rush home and repeat the whole episode again before I got out of the house again.
It's important to understand the deeper roots of this, in the place of trauma. And I had a women's group a while back where, before I knew about the depth of what I went through, and there was a gal there who probably was in that category, and she
Mm-hmm.
always had to be dressed to the nines and, complete makeup. And one day I just asked her, I said, I'd really like to see you come next time without any makeup, and just be able to be yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and there was no way. She was like, I could never ever do that. And of course, I grew up from a family where we didn't wear makeup as a sign of our religiousness, and
Mm-hmm.
so I didn't fully understand that or the level of her trauma. But when you understand that there's so much chaos in that trauma for the little child, that the way that they feel safe is by having everything in place or by having
Mm-hmm.
those objects or all of those kinds of things. And so, when we can move with compassion, and then I know, what some of the things that we work with people on this is helping them to establish a safe place with the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
And that is also really
Absolutely.
beneficial.
It's gotten tremendously better for me. I still, of course, wear makeup, do my hair, but it's nothing like what I was in prison with when I
Yeah.
was younger. It was so bad. And if I had a panic attack and I was putting on mascara and it hit my nose,
Hmm.
I'd have to start from the beginning again.
Hmm.
It was really bad. So if you know anyone that suffers with that, let me tell you, it is not anything to make fun of. It is very, very intense. So the next thing, I have this one also. This is checking, and I had this really bad when I was much younger. But this is, did I turn the stove off? Did I turn the iron off? Did I, an appliance typically has to do with checking, or it could also be, I have habitual checking at night, or I had habitual checking at night before God delivered me of it, where I would constantly be looking at the door because is my father going to come in? Or I was also in the foster care system for a good majority from ages 12 to 18 of my life. And um, it, we used to wrap cords around the door and put the radio up there or something so that if the young men would start to come in, it would fall and hit the door and wake us up because they used to come in and sexually abuse us.
Hmm.
And so that was the checking, the constant, I try to go to sleep, lay my head down on the pillow. I got to check the door. I got to check the door. I got to check the door. And it's constant. And so I still, if I'm in a really stressed out situation, I will still have that
Yeah.
sometimes. Or, you're checking, you'll go home multiple times because you're afraid that you left an appliance on
Hmm.
or something like that. Okay. The next one is thoughts of violence. And this is really a difficult one. Now, thank God I don't have this. This is that somebody is going to do violence to you, or you're going to do violence to someone.
Yeah.
Now, this is something that you absolutely must, some of this is self contained, but some of it can harm other people.
Hmm.
So you must be under psychiatric care if you have this OCD compulsion that either you're going to be harmed or you're going to harm somebody else. So there are people that envision all day long, and I know we don't want to hear this. It's tragic, it's horrible how they could hurt somebody.
Yeah.
And it's very, very scary to live with that. And sometimes they carry it out. And again, psych meds can play a role in that if you're drinking alcohol or doing recreational drugs, it can lower your inhibitions so that some of that comes out and you will hurt somebody.
Yeah.
So that's a really, really, really tough one. The next one is touching objects. And this is quite self explanatory, but it is really hard if somebody has a compulsion to do this, especially if they're around other people who are looking at you and saying, "What are you doing?" Because you have to go back and keep touching the doorknob or touching the chair or whatever it is. You can't, it's almost like a tick. You
Hmm.
can't stop doing it. So that is something that is very hard. And typically, they may have a lucky number or unlucky number of how many times they have to touch the object.
Hmm.
And that's a superstition. So
Yeah.
that is really hard too. Moving right along, we have performance rituals. And this is in your head. Everything has to be performed with excellence. And I believe actually as my daughter was growing up that she had this. She had to get straight A's.
Hmm.
She had to be number one on the cheerleading team. She had to be number one in the dance competition, in the um, what do you call it? Not aerobics, but gymnastics.
Yeah.
So everything that she did, she always had to first place. And if she didn't, she would really have a come apart.
Yeah.
So that's perfectionism. Um, avoidance behavior. This is a coping mechanism, and what it does is if we feel that we go out into society and we're going to be triggered by people, places, or things, and we don't want to be, say that you have the touching of the objects, for instance, you're afraid to go out in social circumstances because you don't want to convey that and have other people see it and think you're weird.
Mhm.
So you isolate at home, and this is really sad. I mean, it's really, really sad because a lot of these compulsions that people have will keep them isolated at home.
Yeah, and we have a son who is, it's not bad, but
Hmm.
he does have those tendencies, and so, and he's aware of them and working through, but he works from home and doesn't leave the house a lot. And it is
Oh,
challenging because, I know that he would like to be in a relationship and all those kinds of things, but it's like, well, you have to get out of the house to
does he have the touching compulsion?
no, but he is more, some of the others about um, things just right, particularly kitchen and eating and things in that arena.
Hmm. Okay, we
So
can talk
it's a
about that
journey.
when I get to the end. I'm going to tell you how we can get rid of some of this stuff through Christ. Amen. Um, the next one is a distorted belief in recalling memories with 100% accuracy.
Hmm.
They are so concerned to have accuracy in their recollection of a memory that if they're asked about it, that they would have to recall the event perfectly,
Hmm.
and they'll even hoard newspapers or articles or anything that has to do with the event.
Wow, wow.
Yeah. Have you ever seen a hoarder's house that's been stacked with newspapers?
I haven't, no.
Oh, very interesting. Yeah.
Wow.
It's like they make little places where you can walk through, but literally it is completely piled high with newspapers. And they can go back and say, at this day, 1998, this is what happened, and blah, 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 blah. Like they know it to a T. It's really amazing. The next thing is excoriation disorder. Now, this is horrible. I think all these are horrible. But this one is skin picking, hair pulling, um, cutting,
Hmm.
anything that has to do with um, going beneath the surface of the skin or harming yourself through pulling out hair or, anything like that. Pulling out your eyelashes. I
Hmm.
have a friend, God bless her. She takes a microscope and she looks at every hair follicle and has to take a tweezer and pluck out, and she's in her 60s and she's been doing this for years and years, pluck out every hair follicle on her legs, her arms. It takes her so long, she rarely leaves the home.
Wow. Wow.
And the thing is that the family gets so used to this disorder that you just end up doing it in front of the family, and the family will just sit there while she's plucking out hairs.
Wow.
It's very, very, very intense. Okay, excessive fear or guilt. This is a pathological attempt to cleanse away any thought of impurity. Now, this is horrific. I saw a documentary on this, and the young woman, she was again, sexually molested when she was a child, incest victim. She felt that her anal cavity was never clean.
Hmm.
So she would take a bottle cleaner brush and sit in the bathtub every single day. I watched this documentary with tears streaming down my face. And she would put it in that region and she would just twist it and twist it and twist it, and the bathtub would be filled with blood
Wow. Wow.
because she was trying to get the feces out of there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the thing is, that was her compulsion, and
Yeah.
it was killing her. It was
Mm.
taking her life. Now, they never said, they ended the documentary without saying whether or not she ever got beyond this. But can you imagine the horror of such a thing?
Mm.
But that,
Re-traumatizing everything.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Her parents were besides themselves. The next thing we all know is fear of dirt, contamination, or germs.
Mhm.
And a lot of people now have this because of COVID.
Yeah.
Because of COVID, they still wear the mask, they still wear gloves, they still, you'll see people driving by themselves in their vehicle and they have a mask on and gloves, and they're still 6 feet apart and all the rest of this stuff. And it's a germaphobe. You know Howie Mandel, the actor? Do you
Yeah.
know who he is? A
Yeah.
comedian? You know that he's a germaphobe.
Mm.
Did you know that Donald Trump is a germaphobe?
No, I didn't.
Yeah. And they both got beyond it where they can actually now shake hands with a person
Mm.
and they can actually hug.
Wow.
So they got beyond it. They
Mhm.
got beyond it. Did you ever see the series Monk?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, he was a germaphobe.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah, I remember the episode where he wouldn't drink water. He was in Mexico and he wouldn't drink the water and he didn't have his brand of bottled water. So by the end of the episode, he was so thirsty. He was just like, I need to have my water. But it's not funny. It's not. It's a fear. It's a huge fear.
Yeah.
And let's see, the last thing, and this I definitely have, and I've had this my whole little life, which is magical thinking, OCD.
Mm.
And what that means is that if I pace up and down the room 25 times, or I wring my hands 25 times, or I wear a certain piece of jewelry, or I wear a certain piece of clothing, daddy won't beat me tonight, or daddy
Mm.
won't come in my bed tonight.
Mm.
That's magical thinking OCD. So there's a lot of people that have this. And typically it's sexual assault victims that do end up having this magical thinking, or somebody who has been physically abused,
Mhm.
because you feel that you don't have the power to keep the other person, especially if you're a child. How can you keep an adult, a male adult, off of you if
Yeah.
you're a little girl? You know what I'm saying? So you do all these magical things in your head. Well, I'm going to wear my pink necklace today because then daddy won't touch me. So it's all these little things that you do that are magical thinking.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. So that kind of hits on most all of them. There are little nuances of different ones that crop up just about any kind of thing you can imagine.
Mhm.
Did you realize there were so many?
No, I didn't. That's quite amazing. It
Mm-hmm.
really opens the door for compassion because a lot of people around us are probably struggling with these things, but we don't understand the fullness of it. And it's easy to go, hey, just get over it.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you have to have everything just so, or, those kinds of things? So,
So let's talk about that. Just get over it. Because the other thing is, they had one in there that I didn't want to add, which was religious compulsion.
oh, wow.
If you belong to a cult, a religious cult, or had a leader over you in a religious environment that says, you have to read 10 chapters of the Bible every night, or you have to recite X amount of verses, you have to memorize X amount of verses, you can't wear makeup, You have to dress a certain way. You can't cut your hair. You can't dance, whatever it is. So they had that one in there too. And I was going to put it, I wasn't sure. But, let's talk about how do we get rid of these compulsions? Because that's what they are, is compulsions,
Yeah.
right? So, what is the first thing that a person is missing, would you say, Adina, if they have these types of compulsions? What are they missing from the Lord?
Well, safety, security, and love.
Mm,
So
peace,
peace. Yeah.
peace, perfect peace that passes all understanding. For a long time, that was what I would say to myself, that, Christ gives me the perfect peace that
Mhm.
passes all my understanding.
Yeah.
That I have peace through Christ, not as the world gives me, but as He gives me.
Yeah.
And so I had to learn, because you have this feeling inside of you, it's churning, that you have to do the compulsion. You
Hmm.
have to do it. And so the peace of Christ is what we're lacking,
Yeah.
because
That's
there's
so
so
good.
much fear.
And then I used to just, I hated when people would quote the verse, well, perfect love casts out fear. And they don't understand that in trauma, it's so layered in to literally every cell of your body that
Mm-hmm.
just saying, oh, God's perfect love will cast out all fear, is
Mm-hmm.
not helpful. It is true, but it's a journey, and everybody's journey is unique, and it will be a progression as layer after layer of trauma is healed and dealt with, for that place to be established of safety and peace and security. So good.
Yeah, some things that helped me along the journey were, first of all, journaling
Mm,
and finding all the scriptures that pertained to the compulsions that I had,
mhm,
because it's taken me a lifetime, really has, to fight against these compulsions
mhm.
and faith over fear.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Trying to make sure that, because the enemy wants us locked in that prison.
Yep.
He wants your son to stay home.
Mhm.
He wanted me to keep going home and washing and re-ironing my clothes and doing all that stuff, so that I would never have a lunch hour of, peace and quiet, and just eat my lunch and go back to work like a regular person. All these things is what the enemy wants for us, right?
Yep.
So it was kind of like I had to give those compulsions over to the Lord,
Mhm.
and you talk it out.
Yeah.
If you say it over and over again, like, say, I had to iron my clothes, I would say to myself, I'm okay if I have wrinkles in my clothes.
Yeah.
It's all right if I have a wrinkle in my clothes. I can get away with it. It's going to be all right. It's not fatal. It's not going to kill me. I really was in a panic struck mode that if I had wrinkles in my clothes, something really bad was going to happen.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. So, with your son, with, having things just a certain way, if he can force himself,
Mhm.
I know this is really, really hard. I'm not, believe me, I've gone my whole life at this, to take that cup and put it over here
Mhm.
and just sit with the agony of it.
Mhm.
You're actually sitting there agonizing inside, but it's like, breathe,
Mhm.
pray. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Take it and put it back where it belongs. Take another object and move it out of place.
Mhm.
It is something that needs to be disrupted.
Yeah.
If we can learn to disrupt our thoughts and ourselves, in these compulsions, they call it exposure treatment.
Yeah.
So, for instance, if you're a germaphobe, um, they'll have you. I mean, it's nothing that's going to freak you out to the point where you go into hysterics or anything like that. But they'll have like a dirty tissue on the floor and have you pick it up
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
something to that effect. If you can force yourself to do this, and if you have a family member, a friend, a spouse, a sibling, somebody that can help you in this walk, that understands you to the point where you can say to them, I'm really I'm just jonesing to iron my clothes right now. I just got to do it. Well, why do you feel you have to do it?
Mhm.
Let's pray.
Yeah.
What can we do? What can God have you do that's different than ironing your clothes right now? What else needs to be done? Do you have any chores on your list that need to be done? Can we perhaps do another chore
Yeah.
so that you
It's
can get out of that compulsion?
yeah. And that is so good. And again, we do it with God. The more and more we do with God, you know, when we, being able to say, I'm not strong enough, I can't do this, everything in me wants to put it over here or whatever, but being able to go, okay, Jesus, give me the strength
Exactly.
to put
Exactly.
it here or whatever it is.
Hmm.
Because again, we're not wanting to establish structures of self, because I did that all my life in my performance perfectionism, but really learning that freedom. And I'm so enjoying this season of my life because there is so much freedom. And
Hmm.
I don't have to be perfect, and I can just be me, and I can share things about my past without embarrassment or shame. And that's the beauty of the power and love of God, um, that intersects our life, that meets us where we're at, meets us in our
Hmm.
trauma, um, and helps us through. So encouraging.
Did you feel there was a certain time where God just broke you, Adina, from that perfectionism? Or was it something that happened over a gradual period of time?
It happened over a period of time, um, and there was some inner healing work that was going on. And then we had a pastor who was very vulnerable from the pulpit, which was highly unusual.
Hmm.
Um, but as I was exposed to seeing, hey, he's very authentic about his
Hmm.
walk, and it doesn't change people's view of him. People don't think less of him, they actually think more of him because he's authentic.
Hmm.
And that began that journey of making that change. So
Okay, so you saw somebody else emulating how you wanted to be, and you took that into your heart and changed it. That's why it's so important. I mean, believe me, I've done the isolation thing. I've been there. I've done that. I've wore that t-shirt.
yeah.
If your son can get out and about with others, if you can almost look at it and say, like in the TV show Monk, everybody knew he had germaphobe.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody knew he was a germaphobe, and they just worked around it.
Mhm.
And he was a brilliant detective.
Yeah.
So it's not letting those things hold you back from your calling in Christ.
Yeah. And actually, in the case of Monk, he was probably a good detective because of those skills,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
exactly, exactly.
And so I think when you can see the upside of some of these things, and not staying entrenched in them, but being able to go, wow, actually this benefits this part of my life,
Mhm.
in that I'm notice things more, whatever details and different things like that.
Yeah, the other thing to do is to write down, what would I do different with that time
Mhm.
if I had that time to regain back? What would I do differently?
Mhm.
You know, would I take on a hobby? Would I write a book? Would I um, get a motorcycle? I'm just thinking of anything, you know. What would you do differently with that chunk of time that you're spending in that prison of
Yeah.
OCD?
Yeah.
So, you know, if anybody's listening to this and it's, you know, you're thinking, I personally feel everybody has a little bit of OCD.
Yes.
I
Yes.
personally feel that everybody does.
It's a
Okay?
spectrum.
Yes. And I also feel that when you're stressed out, you can get OCD. But if you have a chronic OCD illness like I do, or used to, or I know that God's delivered me of most of it. That's why it feels like I still don't have it anymore.
Mhm.
But my husband and daughter grew up with watching me go through this,
Yeah.
you know, and it's very painful for family members and friends to watch.
It
So,
is. And I appreciate you talking about the spectrum because everyone on here can probably go, oh, I do a little bit of that, or I do, um,
right.
but to realize, I so appreciate the analogy of the prison is that if there's anything that I have to do this, otherwise, whatever, it's a prison, you know? And so it's a place we all can evaluate with the Lord to go, okay, I don't want anything holding me back.
Hmm.
And so if there's anything that confines me in this place where I have to do this or I can't do this, um, that means the Lord can't use me freely in a
Exactly.
variety of places and situations. If I go, well, I can never do that, or I could never, I can't speak in front, I can never do that, or whatever. It limits what God can do, and so being able to have the courage to say, hey, God, I'm realizing I'm putting this limit on myself. And it really is a prison, even if it feels like a really big prison and it's not that big of a deal. Well, it still isn't the fullness of freedom that Christ died for. And so being able to say, okay, Lord, let's deal,
Hmm.
what's the root of this, letting him heal those places of trauma. And then, Lord, would you give me the strength to overcome in this area?
It's, you really have to lay it at the foot of the cross. You really have to want to give it over to God.
Yeah.
You know, it has to be inside that you're not wanting to cling or possess this anymore because it's really not ours to possess. It is, it's a dysfunction. It's a sad thing, like I say, for the whole family unit, for anyone that's involved with the person, for a best friend or a spouse. It's really a sad thing to watch somebody in torture like that.
Yeah.
You know, my girlfriend that has the microscope or magnifying glass and picks out the hair every single night with that magnifying glass, that is something you can't say that that is a healthy way to spend an evening with a
Yeah.
family.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
I used to just be so baffled. Like, I know what that feels like,
Yeah.
that compulsion to do that. But if we don't give it over to Christ, if we don't, He can never take it.
Yeah.
He can't take it from us because you're too locked in it.
Hmm.
You're too locked in it. Our brain will be wired this way till death do us part. Because remember, it is incurable,
Hmm.
right?
Except with God. And that's
Except with
that's the good
God.
news is
Except with God.
he can do
But
anything.
yes, but you will, the prognosis is that if it starts in childhood, you will have it for the rest of your life.
Hmm.
And so, you know, one thing that I started doing was testifying about it.
Hmm.
The more that I told people about it and the more that I admitted it to people, they
Hmm.
didn't, some of them responded poorly, but most of them responded sadly,
Hmm.
you know, and they were hurting for me.
Yeah.
And I was allowed to take that in as caring and empathy and let that heal me.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? It's wow, you would carry that burden with me. You would do that. Because I remember, like, for instance, on my best friend's wedding, I kept washing my hair and washing my hair, and it wasn't enough times that I was counting, and my scalp started bleeding.
Mm.
And I said to her, I said, Sandy, can you please do me a favor and come in the bathroom with me and just take my hands and look me in the eyes and say, you don't need to wash your hair again. Because
Yeah.
at this point, I'm a bridesmaid. I'm supposed to be out there in my dress. My
Mhm.
scalp is bleeding from washing my hair, and I can't stop it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, being able to walk in compassion, and how beautiful you're for your friend to meet you in that
Oh,
place.
yeah.
And we get to be Jesus with skin on to people. And
Hmm.
so the courage for you to ask for help is awesome and amazing. And the compassion of someone to say yes, without ridicule, without, come on, get over it. Of course, you don't need to
Hmm.
do that. And that's the compassion of Christ. So beautiful.
Yeah. And so we encourage anyone that's listening to this.
Mhm.
The first thing is open up your testimony to someone that you trust,
Yes.
to somebody that you know loves you. First of all, open it to Christ.
Hmm.
Say, God, I repent of this behavior.
Yeah.
I repent of this compulsion. Because another compulsion, there's also sexual addictions,
Hmm.
and that can be bad sexual addictions, everything from incest to bestiality.
Yeah.
And, we have to turn those compulsions again over to the Lord because they're sin. It's sin.
And it's nothing is impossible with God. And
Hmm.
when we understand the root of it is trauma, we can have compassion for people who are going through this and help give them the tools to overcome, which I believe is through the Lord Jesus Christ. It's awesome.
Hmm. And you may run into somebody that doesn't understand.
Yeah.
And if they don't, brush it off because
Yep.
you know what? They'll never understand the hell you're going through in this compulsive behavior.
Hmm.
And that's our burden that we bear. And if they're not ready to share that with us, then fine, just let it go.
Yeah.
Just let it go. And move on to another person that perhaps is willing to share that burden with you.
Yes.
So I hope some of this will help you with your son too.
Yeah, definitely. He's an adult, and so
Mm-hmm.
we've had conversations about it, and I do believe it's rooted in some trauma that probably was connected to some of my trauma, may have been generational trauma stuff, and
Oh
you
yeah.
know, and so I just have to entrust him to the Lord, that the Lord has a good path for him. And fortunately, it's not super severe, but it is limiting his life. And
Mm-hmm.
so, just believing the Lord will break open those when he's ready to face it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, break open those strongholds. Just break those chains off and let him listen to this if he would, if he feels so inclined. And, I'm willing to talk to anybody that needs advice or help. My email is A as in Apple, M as in Mary, P as in Peter, Irola @gmail.com. So it's amperola @gmail.com. And I don't mind speaking to anybody about this because I know what it's like to be held in bondage to this.
it's so beautiful. Really appreciate that, Alice. And we'll put that in the notes as well. So,
Hmm.
anybody who would like to reach out for help, it is available.
Hmm.
And
I
I just,
mean, I'm not a licensed anything.
mhm,
I'm a survivor.
yeah.
I'm an overcomer. I am not a licensed therapist or anything. I just have lived it and I know what it's like. So, and I
And
just
that's
want to thank you again, Adina, for allowing me the opportunity to share this testimony on
sure.
Testimony Mountain today. I really
So
do.
Very much appreciated. And I really believe sometimes a survivor who's overcoming is the right person to talk to because you understand.
Hmm.
And there's something deep in us as survivors when we are able to talk with someone who went through something similar,
Hmm.
having that, being believed, and having that rapport is so very helpful. And it gives us strength to overcome instead of being isolated in our pain. And so, really encourage people to reach out to Alice
Hmm.
if that's what you're led to do. And so, again, just thank you, Alice, so
You're
very much
welcome.
for
You're
being
welcome.
vulnerable, for sharing your testimony. It's awesome. And just want you all to be encouraged. Please like, share, subscribe, pass this on to someone who it may benefit. And just know that your testimony matters wherever you're sharing it. Whether it's in a public venue or just with a friend or family member or neighbor, there is power when we share the testimony of what God has done in our lives.
Hmm.
And so we'll look forward to seeing you next time on Testimony Mountain.
Absolutely. Thank you.